Enteleki, Verse 1, Chapter 1, Opening. There was a place that was not a place, and in it, two things met. Neither had a shape. That is not a way of saying they were formless, or vague, or hidden in cloud. It is a statement about the number of directions available to them, which was not 3, what could be seen of them. And there was nobody to see. So, the word is a courtesy, was the way a hand held over a candle can be understood by the shadow it throws on a wall. They threw shadows. The shadows were the only part of them that fit. Where the first one was, the dark had an inside. It was not black. Black is a color and belongs to things that reflect. It was the absence you find when you close one eye and try to look through it, and it moved with a sort of enormous patience, folding through itself in ways that made the folding look like the point rather than the movement, around the edges of it. If it had edges, which it did not, but there was a region past which it stopped being, the emptiness had a faint grain, like the surface of a thing seen through frosted glass. The second was brighter and worse. It carried its own light in the way a wound carries blood, without wanting to, and the light did not travel outward from it as light should. It stayed where it was put. It hung in the nothing, in long unmoving sheets, and when the second one shifted, the sheets did not follow. They simply stopped existing in one arrangement and existed in another, and the space between the two arrangements never happened. They regarded each other for an interval that could not be measured, because measuring requires 2 events, and there were none. Then it was over. It is impossible to say who moved first, or whether moving is what either of them did. What can be said is this. The frosted grain around the first one went suddenly and completely smooth, the way water goes smooth when the wind stops. The sheets of stopped light all lay down at once in the same direction, like grass under a boot, and something happened between the two of them so quickly and so completely that the nothing they stood in had to be rebuilt afterwards. There was no sound. Sound is a thing that air does, and there was no air, and there had never been any air. And the silence was not the absence of sound, but the absence of the possibility of it. At the end of the interval, one of the two was open. Not cut, not torn, not pierced, not broken. Those are words for things with insides that stay in the same place as their outsides. The bright one was simply open, along a line that did not have a length, and out of it came a quantity of something that had never been in this arrangement of directions before, and did not know how to be. It came out iridescent. That was the closest thing to a fact about it. It held every color at once, and let none of them settle, so that looking at it, if there had been anything to look, would have felt less like seeing a color than like being shown a color you had forgotten. And then another, and then another, faster than remembering. It was very small. Against the two of them, it was less than nothing, a drop shaken off the edge of an event. The two vast shadows went on with whatever they were doing to each other, and neither of them noticed, and the drop fell. It fell out of the place that was not a place and into the ordinary kind, and the ordinary kind received it without comment, because that is the only thing the ordinary kind knows how to do. Below, the world turned. It was mostly water. Great warm shallow seas lay over half of everything, green with life so thick it discolored the light, and rivers came down off the young mountains loaded with silt and dumped their fans out into the shallows, and along the shorelines the reeds went for miles. Where the water was deep, it was the color of slate. There were storms standing over the equator in slow white spirals, and their shadows crawled across 1,000 miles of open ocean without ever finding land to cross. Nothing on it was looking up. There was a great deal alive down there. More than there had been. More, perhaps, than there would ever be again. And every single one of them was engaged in the business of the afternoon. Herds moved along the river roads with their heads down. Things with wings turned in the thermals over the cliffs, cutting shapes in the air that lasted a second and were gone. In the shallow seas, the ammonites hung in their thousands with their arms out, and below them, the long-necked ones went through the water in a way that made the water look thick. And below all of them, in the deep grey cold, something enormous swam its patrol, with the slow, unhurried certainty of a creature that has never once in its life had to think about being eaten. The drop came down through the last of the emptiness and touched the top of the atmosphere and did not burn. It should have burned. Everything burns. That is what the sky is for. It came through the high, thin air and the cold air and the wet, warm air near the water without slowing, without heating, without so much as parting the cloud it passed through. And where it passed, nothing was disturbed. A gull-sized thing with leathery wings crossed its path 40 feet below and never knew. It struck the sea. There was no splash. The dirt's surface did not dimple, did not ring, did not do the small silver thing a surface does when a raindrop lands. It simply admitted the drop, the way a held breath admits a word, and closed again over the top of it, and the swell went on rolling west with the wind behind it. The drop sank. It went down through the sunlit water, where the light came apart into moving bars, and past a shoal of small fish that turned all together in the same instant for reasons of their own. It went down past the depth where the green goes out of things, and then past the depth where the blue does, and it kept the iridescence it had brought with it the entire way, holding all its colours in the dark like a rumour. It went down, and at 400 meters, where the water was cold and heavy, and moved only when it had a reason, the drop stopped. Nothing was holding it. It simply stopped and hung there, 4 centimeters of something that had come out of a wound in a place with no directions. Suspended in the middle of an ocean, on a planet that had not been asked. Far above, the storms went on their slow way west, on the shore of a continent that had not been named by anyone. A river went on carrying its silt into the sea. And in the deep, out past the edge of the cold, the enormous patrolling shape turned in its long circuit and came a little way towards the new thing, the way anything alive comes a little way towards anything new, and hung a while at a distance in the black, and then went on. It would be back. It would, in the end, be there for a very long time. For now the drop hung in the dark, and did nothing at all, and the world above it went about its enormous green afternoon, and none of it, not one crawling, swimming, flying, browsing, sleeping thing in all that warm and crowded world, had the faintest idea that the afternoon had just ended. Enteleki, Verse 1, Chapter 2, What is Left? The wall siren went at 4:40, which meant it was a Tuesday, because the drills were always Tuesdays, and Ori Malloway did not stop what she was doing. She was 3 hours into a reconciliation of the population count, and the population count was the only piece of work in the redoubt that could not be handed to anyone else, because everyone else lied, not deliberately. Section chiefs rounded up. Medical rounded down. Agriculture had been reporting the same number of hands for 11 months on the theory that if you did not admit a loss, you did not have to replace it. Ori took all of it in and made it agree with itself, and the number she got at the end of the night was the number the redoubt actually was. And she wrote it on the board in her own hand, because the board was the only place in the settlement where the truth was posted in public. She wrote 41,206. Last quarter, it had been 41,880. She stood a moment with the marker in her hand. doing what she always did, which was the second sum. Not how many were gone, but which ones. Because a number with no shape is a number nobody acts on. 206 from the Eastern Waterworks, all at once, in March. 90 over the quarter from the wall. 61 from the wards. The rest in ones and twos from cuts. Cuts! The word did a great deal of work in the redoubt. The siren stopped. Boots went past her door at the double. 4 sets, unhurried in the way that only very well-drilled people can manage at a run. Somewhere below her, the pressure doors made their long sigh as the shift changed, and the smell came up the stair that always came up the stair at that hour. Recycled air, hot metal, the green vegetable stink of the growing decks. It was the smell of every morning of her life. She had been born 11 levels below this room, and she had never once in 53 years breathed air that had not already been through somebody. There was a knock. Deverell from the wall, still in his sealed suit with the helmet under his arm, hair flat with sweat. Nothing, he said. It was a false. Something big went along the outer perimeter and turned north. Level. Yeah. 3, probably. Maybe 4. It didn't come close enough to make anyone brave. You'll log it as unresolved. Oh. I'll log it as unresolved. Deverell agreed, and did not move. She waited. He was 26 and he had something to say, and he was working up to it. And Ori had learned a long time ago that if you filled the silence for people, they never said the thing. Jomar's in the ward, he said at last. When? Yesterday evening. He caught his hand on a bracket while we were repositioning the gun. It went through the glove and about that much into the meat. He held up his thumb and forefinger, a little apart, and then put the hand down as if it embarrassed him. It's clean. It's a bracket. It's our own bracket. Ma'am, it's been inside the wall for 30 years. There's nothing on it. How long since? 31 hours. Then he has 17. Ori said. Go and sit with him. Take the second chair. Not the first. And stay on the far side of the line on the floor. And do not let them talk you into unfastening the strap. Whatever he says, whatever he promises, however sensible he sounds, he will sound extremely sensible. If nothing has happened by the 48th hour, they'll cut him loose and he'll go back on the roster and you can both get drunk about it. Deverell's jaw moved. It's a bracket, he said again. I know, said Ori. I hope very much that it's a bracket. Go and sit with him. Fang. He went. She looked at the board for a while longer and then wiped the old number off with the side of her hand. Here is what was known, which was not much. Something had come out of the ocean, not all at once. That was the part that made it so hard for anybody in the early years to say a sensible thing about it. It had come out over decades, in the way weather comes out, and the first accounts had all been about animals. Fish beaching themselves, dogs turning on their households, gulls flying into buildings until there were no gulls. There was a great deal of that kind of record, and then there was a gap of some years in the record, and then the record began again in a different tone entirely, and was mostly lists of settlements. What it did was not a sickness in the sense the old libraries used the word. It did not consume the body. Something taken by it stayed exactly as strong as it had been, and often stronger. It did not tire in the ordinary way, and it did not sicken. What it did was much simpler and much worse. It removed everything the creature had been for and left the machinery running. It got in through any opening in the skin. Any at all. There was a case in the archive of a woman who had bitten the inside of her own cheek. Nobody knew where it came from. Ori was one of perhaps 40 people alive who had spent real years on that question, in the years when there had still been budget for questions, and the honest sum of everything the 40 of them had produced was a direction. West. Everything got worse towards the ocean, and it got worse in a gradient, and gradients have sources. That was it. That was the whole of it, and no instrument the Redoubt possessed, and no expedition it could survive sending, had ever got within 900 miles of the coast to look. The ordinary floor of the world was level 3 now. Insects. Small birds. The things in the drains. A level 3 could not be reasoned with, could not be frightened off, and could not be cured, and it would give what it had to anything it opened. Most of what came at the wall was level 4, and the wall was built entirely around the proposition that level 4 could be killed if you were willing to spend enough on it. Every few years something else came, and when that happened, a settlement stopped answering, and the standing order about level 5 was 1 line long and had not been changed in 60 years. Do not engage. Disperse. Do not attempt recovery. Ori went up to the top of the North Tower before she slept, because she did it every morning and had done since she was a girl, and it was a foolish habit, and she had never been able to break it. The sun came up over a grey and empty country. Nothing moved on it. There was scrub out to the middle distance, and then the flats, and beyond the flats, the low line of the ranges. And there was not, in any of it, a single living thing that would come when it was called. She had read that there had once been herds. She had read that there had once been so many birds in a single flock that they took a full day to pass overhead, and she had spent a good deal of her adolescence deciding whether or not she believed it. Somewhere out past the ranges, 900 miles beyond anything anyone had walked in 3 centuries, was the sea. And the sea was the enemy's, and had been for longer than the Redoubt had existed. 41,206 people, 2 harvests of reserve, a wall that held, at present, and a fleet that could kill anything up to and including a level 4 for a cost the settlement could pay perhaps 6 more times. Ori Malloway stood in the wind on the top of her tower and did the arithmetic, which she was very good at, and which she had done every morning of her adult life, and which had, for the last 11 years, produced the same answer. Then she went down to see about the second thing, the impossible thing, the thing she had been quietly costing out for 2 years, and had not yet said aloud to anybody who could stop her.